Hello and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. My name is Eric May, and on behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you have joined us for our next live presentation from Spruce Ridge Resources Limited. Please note, you can submit questions for the presenter in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view the company's availability for one-on-one meetings through the Schedule Meetings tab found on the conference platform. At this point, I am very pleased to welcome Steve Balch, President and CEO of Spruce Ridge Resources, which trades on the OTCQB venture market under the symbol SRCGF and on the TSXV under the symbol SHL. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to present. And if you see the first slide, you'll notice that it says Homeland Nickel and not Spruce Ridge Resources. We're in the process of rebranding ourselves as Homeland Nickel after acquiring property or series of properties in the United States in Oregon called Homeland Nickel Corporation, because we want to become America's source of domestic nickel. The projects we've acquired have advanced resources on them, and that'll be the basis of my presentation today. Just a disclaimer, you will hear some forward-looking statements. I'll try and be as accurate as I can. So Homeland Nickel, formerly Spruce Ridge Resources, we're a Canadian-based mineral exploration company and with a new focus on nickel in Oregon. Our main asset is called Cleopatra. It's a nickel laterite. There's a 39.5 million ton resource of 0.93% nickel. We own 80% of it, and we have a path to 100%. It's a very interesting property at surface nickel with the potential to expand this resource substantially. We also have a copper gold joint venture with Benton Resources in Newfoundland, Canada. Benton can earn a 70% interest in the project by spending $2.5 million. They're getting pretty close, so we'll switch to a 70-30 joint venture probably in the next 2 to 3 months. And they've also issued us 15 million of their shares. It's our second largest shareholding in securities. Right now, we have about $8.4 million Canadian in both cash and securities as of today. And our market capitalization is just over 11 million. So a very undervalued early story junior mining company. Capital structure, this is as of March 1st, 2024, about 220 million shares outstanding. And we've been trading around 5 cents a share. We trade on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol SHL, Spruce Homeland. And we're now trading on the OTCQB as SRCGF. And we're also DTC eligible. That means that American shareholders can buy and sell our stock through their broker or directly online. Our cash and securities include Canada Nickel. We have just over 3.5 million shares. It's worth over $5 million. Canada Nickel has large projects in Timmins, Ontario. They are trying to get into production by 2027. They would be the North America's largest nickel mine. We have Noble Mineral Exploration, 10 million shares. Benton Resources, 15 million shares at just over 2.2 million, and some Magneterra shares. These four companies all trade on the Toronto Venture Exchange under their respective symbols. So including our cash position, we're sitting at about $8.4 million in cash and securities. The team is led by myself. I'm a professional geoscientist. I'm the president and CEO of the company. I'm also the VP Exploration for Canada Nickel. We have a pretty lean team. Ashley Naden is our Chief Financial Officer. Errol Farr is our Corporate Secretary. We run a virtual office here in Canada, just west of Toronto. We have a pretty good bench of directors: Vance White, Fifth Capital Markets and Junior Mining Companies. Myself, Michael Den is an exploration geologist with over 25 years experience, President and CEO of Temis Resources, and Birks Bovard is the chair of Energy Fuels and has been involved in the capital markets for over 4 decades. Now, I could talk for an hour about nickel and its prospects, but I just like to leave you with a simple question, and that is, there are at least 15 North American battery factories that are either constructed, in construction, or proposed over the next, say, 5 to 10 years. And the question is, where is all the lithium, nickel, and cobalt going to come from? Most of these factories are going to be in the United States. And so the question is there a source of domestic nickel in America? You can answer that question in part by looking at surface nickel occurrences across the United States, which I'm showing here in the left of the slide. The red represents higher nickel values. The blue represents lower nickel values. And you can see that in Northern California and into Southern Oregon, that's where the bulk of surface nickel occurrences are. And that's where we've focused our exploration in Southern Oregon. You can also look at operational U.S. nickel mines. So there's only one, and that's the Eagle Mine. It's an underground nickel sulfide project with just under 500 billion pounds of contained nickel, and it's expected to close in 2027. And the only nickel mine that's proposed is Tamarack, also in Michigan. It's an underground nickel sulfide deposit, and again, it's only 500 million pounds of contained nickel in 8 separate deposits in production. So this is where we've decided to go into Southern Oregon. This is where the nickel at surface is located. All our projects are in Southwest Oregon. They're all close to infrastructure, have known nickel occurrences. 2 of those projects, Cleopatra and Red Flat, both in Curry County, those are nickel laterites, and they both have resources associated with them. $8 Mountain, which is to the northeast of Cleopatra in Josephine County, is also a nickel laterite. And then we picked up an interesting project called Shamrock in Jackson County. It's the only nickel sulfide project in Oregon, and the grades of nickel there have been over 1% with some copper and platinum palladium. So Cleopatra is our flagship property located in Southwest Oregon. It borders California. It's 15 kilometers west of a major highway. There's direct access to the property by Road 450. It's just under 3,000 acres in size, consisting of 139 mining claims. And you can see the mining claim fabric in the bottom left-hand side. In Oregon, one claim is just over 20 acres. In terms of administration, for exploration permitting, and mining, it's the Department of Geology and Mineral Inventories, also known as DOGMI. To maintain your mining claims, you deal with the Bureau of Land Management. And for land access, you go through the Forest Service. And the Forest Service looks at different parts of the government, such as forestry, fisheries, and water. The key points on Cleopatra: it's a nickel laterite, and laterites are formed by prolonged weathering of ultramafic rocks. They usually start out as peridotite, and they usually have nickel in the 0.2 to 0.4% range. Being a laterite, they're confined to the upper 15 to 20 meters, so this would be a surface open pit operation. And it's a combination of nickel in soil and nickel in rock, where the value of nickel varies, say, from 0.4% up to 1.7%. And the nickel grade tends to increase with depth as you get close to the basement. The history of Cleopatra: well, nickel laterites were found in Oregon back in the 1880s. So these have been known about for a long time. It was very heavily sampled by the U.S. Geological Survey in 1978. There was a National Instrument 43101 resource that was completed in 2009, and that was from a pretty substantial surface sampling and auger drilling program that ran from 2007 to 2009. But that resource was never published because it was in a private company, which was called Red Flat Nickel at the time. That's the company that we've acquired and renamed Homeland Nickel. Interesting that Cleopatra is nearby to the Riddle mine, and the Riddle mine was America's largest nickel mine, operating for about 30 years, from 1954 to 1983. It's been since reclaimed, and I think there was over 50 million tons of nickel at about 1.5% mined from the Riddle mine. It's in the same geology. In terms of the resources that have been delineated thus far, they fall into the measured, indicated, and inferred categories. They're divided based on whether the nickel was in soil or the nickel was in rock. And they didn't get very deep because they were augering from surface using hand augers. But even despite that, they managed to get almost 40 million tons of 0.93% nickel. That's 800 million pounds of nickel. That's twice as much nickel as exists at the Eagle mine. This is probably the most important slide of our presentation. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a color image of nickel grade, which the blue would be around 0.7 nickel. The magenta or pink would be upwards of 1.2%. And you'll see that almost all the claims at Cleopatra have average nickel grades of greater than 0.7%. 46 claims, or almost 950 acres, had an average nickel grade of 1.12%, and 949 acres is equivalent to 10 million tons per vertical meter. The average depth of exploration was 8 to 12 feet, and the maximum depth of exploration was 23.5 feet, and that was only in one hole. Most of this this auger drilling, was only done to 8 feet below surface, because that's really as deep as they could get. So in our upcoming exploration plan, we hope to test the nickel laterite to a depth of 15 feet or 15 meters. And if you just look at this higher grade area alone that has 10 million tons per vertical meter, if you multiply 10 million tons by 15 meters, that's a lot of nickel. And the current resource is 39.5 million tons here at Cleopatra. This is a monster deposit. Our second property with a nickel resource is called Red Flat, and it's located just off the coast of Oregon, again in Curry County, about 20 kilometers southeast of Gold Beach. It's 10 kilometers of Highway 101, and you can access it directly by Road 635. It's just under 2,000 acres, or 84 mining claims, and the mining claim fabric is shown in the bottom left, where one claim is roughly 20 acres. And it's also administered by DOGMI, that's for your exploration, permitting, and mining. The Bureau of Land Management would be for your mining claim registration and renewal, and the Forest Service, which would be for land access. Some key points about Red Flat. Again, it's a nickel laterite where the ultramafic rocks, usually peridotite, have been upgraded. They've been weathered and upgraded from 0.3% to 1%. This area has been explored to a greater depth, up to 18 meters, but not systematically. So there's still a lot of room to expand the resource. It was discovered in 1939. There was some reconnaissance and sampling done in 1947, a lot of drilling in 1954, and again in 1978. This project was acquired and sampled and augured by Red Flat Nickel from 2007 to 2009, and a National Instrument 4301 resource was produced for this property, but again, it wasn't published, so it has to be treated as historical, even though it was done to 43101 standards. But the average sampling depth here is less than 10 meters, so given the fact that it goes down to at least 18 meters, we see substantial potential to increase this resource as well. And the resources, again, were based on rock and soil, some measured 4 million tons, indicated 6 million, and inferred over 8 million, for a total resource of 18.8 million tons, grading 0.84% nickel. That's almost 350 million pounds of nickel. And that's at a 0.7% nickel cutoff. Our third property is more of a grassroots exploration play. It's called $8 Mountain, and it's located west of Selma, Oregon, in Josephine County. It's near a highway and contains local trails and access routes so that you can get onto the property. It's a very large property. We've staked 78 mining claims, but the actual nickel mineralization is much more substantial. It would cover almost the entire mountain. And it's also administered by DOGMI for exploration and mining, Bureau of Land Management for the mining claims, and the Forestry Service for land access. So we would hope to get there this summer, do a little bit of prospecting, and do a bit of a meet your neighbor to make sure people understand what our intentions are at $8. $8 is a nickel laterite. It's underlain by fresh peridotite. And fresh peridotite, when it's exposed to air, is naturally CO2 sequestering. So this is a bit more of a green property than the other two. It's a very large area, as I mentioned, explored by Freeport in 1942 with lots of discovery pits and some shallow shafts dug. There was a minor resource of 9 million tons at just over 0.5% identified, and that's not on our property. That's on an adjacent property. They also found chromium and cobalt, but there really hasn't been much work done since 1976. And there's chromium, cobalt, and nickel on the property. So our plans for $8 is keep it in our back pocket, and as we advance Cleopatra and then Red Flat, we'll turn our sights to $8. Sorry for the freeze up of my presentation. I live out here in the country and my internet connection, it can be very poor. Our fourth and final property is called Shamrock. It's located in Jackson County, 30 kilometers north of Medford. It's intersected by Road 635. So with all our properties, you can drive right to the edge of the property and then access by four-wheel drive. It's about 758 acres from 40 mining claims, same administration. It's a very interesting property. It's the only nickel sulfide project in Oregon. There's nickel, copper, platinum, palladium, and cobalt. Very limited drilling. It's got road access, and there's some underground workings. They did take a bulk sample. I believe it was 200 pounds of 1.1% copper, 1.3% nickel. So you get this is a classic copper, nickel, platinum, palladium, nickel sulfide deposit. There was a bit of previous drilling. There's not a lot of information available on that. There's 11 drill holes, several trenches, which you can see in the top left. This is older data, of course. Also, some of the sections show that the mineralization is faulted, which means it would be open at depth. The mineralization that they did find originally was very shallow. Of typical mineralization near the main adit in a kind of a altered norite, and it came back at 1.19% nickel, almost 2% copper, and over 3 grams per ton of total precious metals, mostly palladium and platinum. We also own a 30% joint interest in the Great Burnt Project in Newfoundland. Here I'm showing a long section that where south is to the left. It's a high-grade copper deposit. There's an existing resource. I think it's around 70 million pounds of copper, very high grades. It outcrops at surface, so you could have a open pit and then a shallow ramp. It's still open at depth down plunge. And just some of the selected drill results from 2020, there were 27 meters of over 8% copper. In 2018, 21 meters of 6% copper. And Benton Resources in 2023 hit 13 meters of over 8% copper and almost 27 meters of 7% copper. So this is a very interesting at surface and close to surface high-grade copper deposit, which Benton is exploring. They can earn a 70% interest by spending $2.5 million in the ground and issuing us 15 million shares, which they have. Then we would move to a joint venture in which we would have to fund 30% of the exploration, which we would be happy to do. So that's my presentation. If you have any further information, you can contact me directly. That's my cell number, or you can contact my corporate secretary, Errol Farr. Again, we trade on the venture exchange as SHL, Spruce Homeland, and the OTCQB as SRCGF. Any more information you'd like, you can go on our website, spruceridgeresources.com, which soon will become homelandnickel.com. And now I'll try and answer some questions. So Roberto wants to know if there's a nickel supply deficit or one coming. And more than a nickel supply deficit, I would say that people are rethinking where their nickel is coming from. Right now, 50% of the world's nickel comes from Indonesia. And if you do a Google search, nickel mining in Indonesia, BBC, you'll see exactly how they mine and process nickel there. They have no environmental standards at all, and they've been coming under a lot of criticism. So 50% of the world's nickel comes from that type of mining and processing. Almost all of it goes to China. China controls processed nickel. The second largest producer is the Philippines. The third largest is Russia. So I don't think any of those three countries are super close to the United States. We're developing a very large nickel project in Canada, but it just won't be enough to meet the needs, not only in stainless steel, but also in the emerging battery technologies, which will have to rely heavily on nickel. So, you could say there isn't a supply deficit right now. The nickel price is increasing pretty quickly, and we think we're on the verge of a major nickel supply deficit or a major price increase. Chip wants to know if our 4 projects in Oregon are greenfield. They are greenfield in the sense that there is no infrastructure on any of the 4, except for a little bit of historic workings on Shamrock. So these would all be considered greenfield. We're working with Dogamy and also the Forest Service to get permitting. Our exploration proposal is we want to go in to Cleopatra and drill a series of 70 shallow holes to a depth of 50 feet, sample it, and generate a new resource, which would substantially increase what is there now. We also want to take, I believe it's 21 pails. They're 23 liter in size, 5 gallons of material. And we're going to have the mineralogy done. And also we're going to do some metallurgy to show people that the nickel can be recovered from this nickel laterite. Jose wants to know what our milestones are to the end of the year. So the big thing is I want to get on the ground at Cleopatra with that 70-hole drill program and generate a new resource. Also, I want to get on the ground in Cleopatra and get enough material so that we can do our mineralogy, that is to find exactly where the nickel is, what minerals the nickel is coming from, and also what kind of metallurgy would work. So what kind of processing would be involved if we tried to extract the nickel. And there has been some metallurgy done in the past. The recovery rates were quite high, actually. One was, I think, 93%. So we know we can get the nickel out, but we want to make sure that the process we use makes sense. I think I've pretty much run out of time. How many warrants and options do we have? I think I showed that. That's in our presentation. Not a lot. And you can see updated share position on CDAR. Thank you.